Now, the first team we're going to talk about in Group B is going to be Riddle Order. Once again, the returning representative here for the Challengers Japan scene. Still the best logo in the Challenger scene as well, no doubt about that. And there's not too many big changes. In fact, just one player change. So Jojo, Soldam, Yatsuka, and Kaide continuing on with the team under Coach Vorse, still the same. And then Minty will be joining them. And Ace, who used to take that main controller spot, is actually now on Fennel and unfortunately didn't make it this time. So one small change. But overall, I will say that whether it's because of the roster change or whatever else, it does seem like they've remedied a bit of the disadvantages that I saw in them last year. So let me, just for this team, because they're kind of returning pretty much as the exact same team. In 2024, I said Riddle had great, great calls and also great set plays. But they always took time to set up the play. So what I mean by that is they would always kind of walk up to the line of scrimmage, wherever they needed to start their set play, right? So if you think about Ascent, right? Let's say you're retaking B, then you've got like 3 people on, the CT side waiting right outside the gate, and then you've got one on market, something like that, where you always have, everyone has to kind of be in their positions, and then, I don't know their comms, but it felt like then they did the 3-2-1 count, and then they would execute the play, and then it was good. But the problem with that becomes that if the other team pushes and creates extra reach after their attack, or even, when it's flipped, then Riddle doesn't get to play their game because they're not able to get to their positions, right? And then the timing will be messed up and things like that. So that's why one of the reasons Nongshim, when they were SPG, they were able to play that weird comp with, the Brim and the Harbor and things like that on Ascent against Riddle Order. The idea was that you're delaying all of that further and further, so Riddle kind of has to wait further and further and miss their timing. Now, Riddle, I think, adjusted in that specific game much more quickly than I thought they would, so that impressed me. But overall, that was kind of their quote-unquote bad habit. Now, this has changed. They've gotten a lot more aggressive, much more aggressive, and it seems like they are more willing to make sure they get reach themselves. And it's not just Soldam. And I think that's the important part. Yatsuka now picking up that Euro role a lot for this team. And that seems to be working out quite well. Soldam doesn't have to be the one that's just kind of full sending it on his own on something like the Neon or the Jet. And that seems to be very helpful. Now, with that, I think they've lost a little bit of their old flair of the very, very good set plays and things like that. But I do think it favors the current meta a little bit more. And I do think that this kind of style of, should we say solo aggression? It's not really, they're not just like solo full sending it, but that extra element of aggression where you're kind of still fighting for extra space does work out better in challengers as well. So I do want to credit that, but I do think right now it doesn't fit like a glove. Let's put it that way, right? There's still a little bit of that overheat coming through. But I am curious to see how that will hold up against the best of the best. They should still be a contender for sure. But, last year I thought they were a contender, not a favorite. Probably going to be the same this year when I go through and kind of compare them one by one against other teams. But if we were to talk about the player to watch out for, because of that, actually, I'm going to be keeping my eyes on Yatsuka. It's going to be about whenever he does play the Euro, which I think should still be played quite a bit, how much is he able to provide the support? And if he doesn't, then is he providing that same value elsewise, right? That's going to be my big question. So, but honestly, this is another team where you can kind of pick any player and it's like, okay, well, there's reasons to keep your eyes on this player. So that is Riddle Order coming out from Japan. So now I want to talk about the roster right away, because if you've been following the Challenger scene at all here in Pacific, you're going to recognize a lot of these names. So there's 3 very strong veterans supporting 2 of the newer additions to this roster. So you've got Xavier, KPTC, and Mosier. Now, obviously, not all of them have been with NAOS the entire time, but they've been in their respective rosters for quite some time. And I think they've all, Xavier, KPTC, and Mosier, all were highlights of their previous rosters, in my opinion, at least for some extended period of time. Then you've got the addition of Nakia and Zan, who I'm not that familiar with, but they seem to be very promising mechanical aspects. So this works out in the sense that you've got Xavier K, PTC, and Mosier now supporting these two so that they can kind of just play their own game. And you see this in the way they play. And it seems like they have a decent understanding of macro based on what their strengths are. And what I mean by that is it's not that they are showcasing like the best textbook understanding of the map, but they are playing this way where they're saying, okay, we want to kind of double down on this section with our Sentinel util, and that way we can focus on a big fight here, and then we can play the retake here because we know that our fights are going to be good, that our teamwork is going to be good. And I think that, again, very, very valuable in challengers. I want to say this might be the most promising NAOS version. And I mean that within NAOS themselves, like over the course of the years, just because I think they are playing the most reliable. Maybe we should, let's revise this. The most reliable NAOS version that we've seen across the years, just because I think there's a very, very strong understanding of this is what we're good at. We're going to set up the map this way to make sure that we can support what we're good at. It does mean it's a little bit readable, though. It does make it a bit readable. It does make it a bit readable, right? When a team kind of all-ins on their strengths, and that relies on creating their own fights, if they're not able to necessarily force it every single time, if it relies on more so, okay, we know this is how we're going to tweak the macro a little bit so that we have a better, easier time without having to think about macro, I do think it gets a little bit readable. So I think that's the danger that NAOS has a little bit in terms of their setups, or, the moment you see, a certain piece of util, you're like, okay, we know that there's three here. Like, they always go for these fights. They always go for these, the set plays, the mini skirmishes, things like that. But I think within the challenger's realm, again, that's what gets you far. And NAOS just in general has always been that team that was always above the median within Ascension, at that level, but wasn't able to quite break through. I do think I've rated Xavier K quite highly throughout the past years. I thought Mosier was quite promising as well, and PTC, I still can't forget the old full sets PTC KO back in the very, very first, what was it called, Ascension? No, the last chance qualifiers and things like that, where, I mean, he was a terror. He was a terror against the against the Pacific teams back then. So I still can't forget that. I think that support doesn't go anywhere, right? Sure, he might not be the best of the world or anything like that anymore, but I think it's still very, very solid as someone who's able to support the rest of the team. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to that. When you've got those veterans, I do think it gives a little bit more of consistency to this team. I mean, I hope not, because it's not the same roster anyway, but I don't think they should ever devolve into chickens with their head cut off, right? So this was the problem with NAOS last year, where they would look good, they had decent fights, and then suddenly they just looked like they were just all taking their own fights without communicating. I don't think that should happen when you've got these three on the roster, and then you've got two additions that seem to be very good at kind of building off of that support that they're getting. So this is going to be a very, very promising team. For me, the spotlight here is going to be on Xavier K. I know I talked, I was glazing PTC a little bit there, but that's the old days. PTC no longer playing that main initiator role. Xavier K will be, and I think Xavier K has always had, has always proven that he's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. Xavier K was one of those players I wouldn't have been surprised to have seen in, a team kind of try him out this year, even. I don't know how well he would have done, but it was just like this player seems worth a trial, at any time. So I'm expecting him to be able to shine as a leader here. Now, you may be wondering why I'm kind of talking them up so much when they, weren't at the top of SEA. And that's true, but I think the way they play is very good for what they're good at, and I like what they're showing. To me, I like it when a team understands what their strengths are and then knows how to fill in those gaps. And I think NAOS understands that. The problem is we're going to talk about Full Sense next, but the problem is going to come down to the execution of it. And so, unfortunately, they're not quite a shining example yet. But I think with the little extra time, they can be a bit of a dark horse. Let's put it that way. So let's talk about Full Sense then. Another household favorite coming out from Thailand. Of course, now part of the SEA Challenger Circuit. And Full Sense, basically, I think if you take a look at Full Sense versus NAOS, you get a pretty good example of what each of these teams are good at. If NAOS seems to have a better understanding of how to fill their gaps and how to play their own macro, Full Sense is good at fighting. They're just good at fighting. They're just better at fighting. And it's no surprise if you followed the Thai scene for a little bit. These are all very recognizable names at this point, kind of the next generation of that Thai talent. You've got Leviathan, you've got Laz, not that Laz, this Laz. You've got Sephiroth, you've got QQ God, you've got Potter, and you've got Opinia as well. So I would say Leviathan, Laz, Sephiroth, QQ God, Potter, all fairly recognizable names if you follow the Thai and SEA scene even just a little bit. And it's no surprise that they're just good at fighting. This is, to me, this time around, Full Sense is the epitome of SEA Valorant this year. They are the ones that are just like, okay, we know we just win this fight. We know we can get through with micro. We know we're better at fighting. We know we're better at training. That's not to say that they're playing like no macro. That's not to say that they're playing a completely messy game. But I do think they just come out on top in a lot of the fights that they take. So to me, Full Sense is going to be kind of I guess maybe the gatekeeper, so to speak, of this Ascension. And not to say that I think they're at the bottom, but they will, if you can beat Full Sense, then you might be a contender or a favorite. But if you can't beat that, then there's no shot. And I think Full Sense will basically, not even maybe the gatekeeper, maybe the bouncer, really. Who's just going to say, like, gatekeeper makes it sound like it's the gate to the big town, but I mean, like, they are going to be right there. They will be a contender, but they will determine whether you also get to be a contender or not. They're the gatekeeper of the top portion of Ascension, not necessarily just the average. So I think Full Sense is going to be that team that you can expect a lot of highlights. Expect a lot of highlights from this team. And I think they're a fun team to watch. I do think that there's value in that. I think being just good at fighting, good at trading, having talented individuals gets you very far in challengers. Now, whether you win or not, that again, it's just whether you have one or two maps that you have a better understanding of, things like that, or just an overall better grasp of the meta, which I don't think they do necessarily. So I wouldn't say that they are a favorite, but I do think like Full Sense is one of those teams that I would expect can make it to one of the BO5s, right? So I expect them to be a bit of a hard hitter in that sense in terms of pure firepower, right? So yeah, let's put it that way. Firepower is their game. Spotlight's hard. Spotlight's hard on this one. But let's go with Sephiroth. I'm going to go with Sephiroth this time, playing that main controller role. Again, especially when you're a team that's kind of based on that firepower, having a really sturdy controller can really up your game, right? Because they can be that rock and that anchor that you need. So my eyes are going to be on Sephiroth. If he can help, clean up maybe some of that messiness with his own firepower, I think that's going to be huge. Also, obviously, when you're a team that relies on the firepower, the smokes come in big because they eliminate a lot of those angles. So my eyes are going to be on Sephiroth. But again, this is a team that I think throughout the entire roster, you're kind of packed with firepower, and you should expect a lot of gunfights coming out of this team. It's time to talk about Nongshim RedForce. Listen, it's not just the F is capitalized in RedForce. Listen, bias aside, everyone I've talked to agrees that Nongshim RedForce should be favorites at this tournament. And I don't think there is, any reason to believe that won't be the case. I think Nongshim RedForce also went through kind of a ideal course specifically for Ascension, where they had a roster change going into Stage 2. They showcased how they wanted to change things. It didn't quite work out. Then they were able to rebalance it towards the end of Stage 2. And then now they've had time about 2 months to brush up on that and then get ready for Ascension. So they've taken their learning similar to Boom, where they say, okay, in fact, I think Nongshim kind of struggled to adjust. They kind of hit that wall early, so the mental aspects shouldn't really linger too much. And then they were able to start to build in stage 2. So again, not just because of bias, but I almost think that they learned their lesson earlier than Boom in certain cases. So I think that's a positive, because they've showcased that they are learning from it. If they remain the same, then I wouldn't be saying that. But I would say that with RB, they found a good balance of kind of, let's say, traditional foundation and Nongshim spice. So where it's not just full send W gaming, we know we're just better anyway. Like that just didn't work in Pacific, right? Because you're not just better. So you couldn't just full send Dombi every single time and expect trades. But they were able to now say, okay, well, how much more information do we actually need to still execute that? Like, okay, that's what we're good at. That's what we like. But now how do we adjust that to make sure there's even more of a guarantee rather than, oh, we're just better, because you weren't just better. So I think that's huge. There is the big question of X-Ross, has consistently been on this roster, although he couldn't play in VCT Pacific. But curious to see if X-Ross will play a role in a 6-man kind of potential and capacity. I've talked about X-Ross all last year. X-Ross is a super talented flex player. He's an amazing Yoru, things like that. But obviously, you've got other, you've got, I'm sure RB could play the Yoru for you if you need it and things like that. I think Francis could pick that up if he needed as well, and he has in the past. But curious to see what they're able to cook. I do think that they are now with this time. Like, this is a team that was experimenting with the Waylay early on as well. I think that's always been part of their MO on how do we figure that out for ourselves. I think it works well for this team on paper. I think the Neon is still going to be really good, right? Neon is still a very, very prominent duelist in this space. And overall, I think you look at the way they were playing in stage 2. And I think, yes, it wasn't good enough for tier 1. Or not to win in tier 1, right? But it was good enough to be in the middle of the pack in tier 1, which is incredible. And again, I know Boom kind of had a big up and a big down, so it doesn't feel the same, but Boom was similar as well. So I think both of them, were able to prove that, okay, like we can hang, we just need to unlock that extra 2%. Some people are worried about the lack of Margaret, there we go, and Coach Val Analysis. And I miss Margaret, to be honest. I think Margaret, had some very, very big moments for the team. And then also, I know Val Analysis from even before Nongshim RedForce as well. So I respect him a lot as a coach. However, I think a lot of people are forgetting that, yes, Margaret was part of the team with SPG last year, but when it comes to the coaching staff, it was actually Silkanon and Sungmin who were able to lead SPG last year. Sungmin came in on kind of that short term for Ascension and was able to help Silkanon lead the team to lifting the trophy at Ascension and securing their spot into VCT Pacific. So I don't think it's going to be as big of a hit. I still think that the ideas and whatnot, it doesn't create a big shift here for the Nongshim team and their chemistry. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they've cooked up. I am positively excited. Yes, I'm nervous because, because I'm part of the org. Yes, I'm nervous. But I think it should be good. I think Francis back to the IGLing after kind of having that brief period with RB. I would say that Francis's IGLing has upgraded. Well, learning from RB a little bit. So I think that's very helpful. And I think it should be good. My spotlight. Who is going to be my spotlight player? I'm going to say Dom. Well, I'm going to say Francis. I was going to say Dombi just because I'm curious if he's going to pick up more Waylay again. But I think Francis is a big game player. Also, I think his IGLing is actually really, really good. Like to the point that I'd be scared that even if Nongshim is able to stay in Pacific, that I think a lot of people are always going to have their eye on Francis within Korea. So I rate Francis IGLing very highly. I think he's a big game player, and I think his calls, his kind of spontaneous gut checks are going to be the X factor. Like, that is the X factor, not just some individual clutching. I mean, they can all clutch, but I think Francis's those gut calls are going to be what's going to separate Nongshim even further. But overall, they should be. I have no idea what they've prepped, but I have big hopes, especially after talking with all the players and the coaches in the past as well. I have very, very big hopes. Last but definitely not least, Velocity Gaming, coming out from South Asia, representing India. And this team also has some familiar names. Boy, oh boy, do we have some familiar names. You got SK Rossi, you got Russ, you got Lightning Fast. Then you got Madeline and Damara. So you've got some very recognizable names. Obviously, I think most people are going to recognize SK Rossi, Russ, and Lightning Fast as players. I mean, Russ obviously has been around for a long time. SK Rossi and Lightning Fast have been around within the South Asian scene for a long time as well. And all of them have played in Tier 1, in some way or form as well. So the thing to note here is you've brought in Madeline and Damara, but I would say that the spotlight still shines on kind of what we'll think of as the core here with SK Rossi, Russ, and Lightning Fast. SK Rossi still remains on that op duty, and again, I mean, say what you will, meme about it what you will, but within the challenger scene, SK Rossi's op was always quite good. So, and I think, he's also grown much more as a player, not just opping with just 1 or 2 agents anymore, able to kind of adjust to that. So I think that's quite helpful. So I think that's the strength. I think that's one of the big strengths, where you have a dedicated opper, you can play around that, and if their opping is definitely, kind of top-notch for the challenger scene, then that's going to be super, super helpful. I would also say that Russ's experience cannot be ignored, right? Again, say what you will about his stats on certain teams or certain rosters, but his experience, his IGLing, etc., that's not something you can find easily in the challenger scene. So I would rate that quite highly as well. Honestly, I will say it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to see what to expect every time from South Asia, because they always seem to just end so much earlier. So it is a little bit hard to tell. But it's also hard to tell because they've been so dominant. When you've been so dominant, which most of these teams have, but for instance, for Southeast Asia, we've got teams that weren't the top seeds. So it's like, okay, we kind of see a different kind of collection and balance now of what you're good at and what you're not good at. And when you take teams like Velocity, where it's like, okay, well, you just completely dominated your own scene. I mean, there's not much. You've only lost 2 matches for this entire year. So it is a little bit hard to read. It's been 3 months since we've seen them play. We have no idea what they're going to bring out. So much has changed. I don't expect them to play a lot of the same comps that they have, because I think the meta's changed a lot. But who knows? I will say, though, that I was hoping that this would be the case, and after watching and also looking at the stats, there is no doubt that the spotlight for this team is going to be... Let's play the roster page so we can see the full roster. And none other than Lightning Fast. And this isn't too surprising to me. Back when he was on Global Esports as well, I think Lightning Fast was very promising. When he was able to play his own game, when he could just focus on his own game, when he wasn't given too many different tasks or like too much flexing around on roles, he was able to just frag out, right? If you told him, like, lock down this area or take this area, like, he would go in and frag. I think it's very clear that he can frag at some of the highest levels, especially in challengers for sure. So I think Lightning Fast is quite promising. When you've got the support of Russ, when you've got, someone you can trust on the op like SK Rossi and things like that, I think Lightning Fast is going to be a very, very big shining beacon. I will just say, I do think without we're just going to say LFs, right? Without Lightning Fast's heroics, though, not sure how far we go, just because the competition is way too tough. And so if Lightning Fast isn't able to just take control of the game, I do wonder. And in the controller role, and when everyone knows that, everyone should know that you're the player to target here for Velocity Gaming, I think they have to watch out. I think Velocity has to watch out, where they have to, if you're going to, if you don't have other ways that you think you can really create more space and angles, then you have to figure out a way where you can basically use Lightning Fast kind of as bait. to be able to take control of the game. So I am curious to see what they've cooked up. They're a bit of that dark horse still, just because I think the competition that you're up against is still weaker. And this is going to be the case, this is always the tough case with regions like Oceania, or in this case, South Asia, where it's a little bit further out. It's harder to get a variety of experience and practice and things like that. So it takes some time. But I do think there's still that little bit of a gap. But I think that gap gets shored a little bit with Russ, and in addition, SK Rossi and Lightning Fast as well, with their additional experience in Tier 1. So I think it should be a better showing, perhaps, than in the past. I mean, actually, last year, Revenant's showing was pretty good for South Asia, in my opinion. So I think there's some hopium to be had, but I wouldn't go too far as like a contender. But could be a dark horse. Could be a dark horse. But again, it's hard to tell. But are they a solid team? Yes, I think so. Do I expect as strong of a showing as Revenant? I'm not sure. Granted, I didn't expect that strong of a showing from Revenant either before the tournament started. It was only after the first 7 rounds that they dominated against SPG, where I was like, okay, these guys did their homework. So I started to put a lot of respect to their name. So who knows? Who knows? Velocity could surprise me once again. So that is it. That's all 10 teams. Try to go through it as quickly as possible. I know it still went a little bit long, even though we didn't cover all the different stats, etc. But in case you needed to know kind of, okay, well, which player should I look out for? Which team should I look out for? Those are the 10 teams. All 10 teams, though, I think should be quite competitive. I don't think there's any complete washes this time around. I think with the new format, the new systems that we had in place, that we have gotten the best teams that the Pacific Challenger scene has to offer. And I think it can be a bit of a bloodbath, and it all starts tomorrow. So make sure you tune in. We will be watch partying all the games. And if you're watching this on October 13th, hopefully you can tune in to the stream later on today, where I'll try to put a comment right before I go live, where we will be doing a quick tier list as well, which I think is going to be really tough for this one. But we'll do that. So this should be a very, very exciting Ascension tournament where two teams will be able to move on to VCT Pacific 2026. That's going to be it for this one. Let me know down in the comments below, just like the first video, if you follow some of these teams more in depth throughout the whole year. Feel free to drop some trivia and knowledge about the teams down in the comments so we can all share the information and get hyped for these teams and matches. And of course, let me know who you think are going to be the 2 teams that move on to Pacific 2026. That's going to be it for this one, and I'll see you all live on the stream.